And this is the bit I find quite difficult to grasp. But the story is that she said, Levens will never go from father to son until a white fawn is born in the park. We have black fallow deer, so this is fairly unlikely. And not only that, the River Kent will freeze. That's the river at the bottom of the garden, which is a fast-flowing river, and it very rarely does freeze. And for a long time, neither of these things happened until a date in the 1880s, I believe 1887, not quite sure, when both these things happened. The white fawn was born and the River Kent froze, and guess what? The first male heir for 200 years was born. That's Alan Desmond Bagot, my forebear. And that's the story, or that is the story to make up for the reason why there wasn't a male heir, whichever way you like to put it. It's nice that in 1981, when my son Richard was born, the River Kent also froze over on the 12th of December 1981, and icicles hung from the bank. And was there a white fawn? I just can't remember.
Okay, so that's the curse which sort of kicks us off, as I say. Now, there's about 3 or 4 other good stories. A lot of places have a white lady and a grey lady. You've got one of those.
That was the grey lady, really, and she does appear from time to time. She appeared to my sister Lisa. My wife also has seen somebody on the back drive going round the corner, round a wall, which is a blind bend, and when she got round there was nobody. But she only thought about that 3 days later. She thought, where was that person when I went round the corner? She wasn't there. And that's a bit curious too.
But there's a pink lady, which is unusual. White ladies and grey ladies, we find stories of these. There's a pink lady. Yes,
there is a pink lady. We're not sure who she is, but she has appeared to, in fact, to groups of people going around this house. So she could be seen maybe today, who knows? She may just appear. I suppose she's somebody who's helped over the years. She appears in a mob cap and long pink flowing dress. And that's it, she just appears. She has appeared to a group when the guide was saying, here are the various ghost stories of the house, and one of them is the pink lady. Somebody said, oh, there she is. And there she was, up there, and then she sort of faded away, and 30-something people saw her. We have yellow Labradors. We don't have little black dogs of the sort that are seen. There's no reason for this. We can't work it out at all. But just occasionally we've had people staying here who've been quite convinced that when they go upstairs to bed at night, a little dog follows them, even into the bedroom. And then they spend the night looking for this dog underneath all the furniture and things, and in the morning, quite clear, there isn't a black dog anywhere. Why does that sort of thing happen? I have no idea why that happens. But it does happen, and it's happened to... We've had famous concert artists. We have concerts here from time to time, and fairly famous people have seen this little black dog.
Now, in slightly more recent history, there's a story concerning the harpsichord that's here.
There is indeed. This concerns a certain priest, I can't remember his name, but he was a priest, who came to the front door. He was a friend of the family. He knew the house well, and he also knew that he came because there was somebody ill upstairs that he wanted to see. And in those days, you just walk into the house. Nobody locked doors or anything. So he walked in, and there in front of him was someone playing the harpsichord out there in the hall. And he noted that above his head there was a light burning, and he thought, well, he better not disturb this chap playing the harpsichord. And he knew where the chap was who was ill, so he went upstairs and saw him. There was maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes there, and came back downstairs again afterwards, and there was the harpsichord still being played by the same chap, and he thought, well, again, I better not disturb him, tiptoed past and was just about to leave the house when he noticed there was a light under the door into this room. And so he came and opened the door, and in here was my mother and a friend sitting by candlelight having tea, because it was a dark winter's evening. And after the usual pleasantries, he said, well, why are you sitting by candlelight in here when there's a light burning next door, and what's more, there's a chap playing the harpsichord out there, and, you know, why are you sitting in here in candlelight? And and Mum said, well, there are two things strange about what you've just said. The first is that there should be a light out there, because there's a mains power failure and there's no light in this house at all, not electric light.
Which is why we're dining by candlelight.
Yes, that's right, indeed.
Yes.
And the second strange thing is that there should be nobody playing the harpsichord out there, because the only person who does is my father, who is just not here. He's away at the moment. He's out on doing a job of work. And so they rushed outside, of course, and saw the scene. And the scene was nobody playing the harpsichord, no light on, but the harpsichord was standing there. Obviously, my mum was very worried by this, thinking that here was the last sighting of my father as a ghost, having been killed in a car crash, for instance, not knowing where he was. And so great consternation and worry, because he hadn't said where he was going to spend the night or anything, somewhere in West Cumbria, Cumberland those days.
As it was, yes.
And so they eventually resolved that they would come back and the priest would meet Father and discuss the tune that was being played, because the priest had got in his mind what the tune was. And they resolved that the next day they would foregather and Father would be there. And so that duly happened.
So the idea being that if it was a tune that your father could play,
yes,
that would say, right, then it was definitely an apparition of him, some
yes,
sort of projection of him.
And particularly because my father, like me, can not play terribly well, in that he can't sight read tunes, so he learns them up with a great deal of effort. And he had 3 tunes on the go at that time. So they foregathered, as I say, and went through Father on the harpsichord what tunes Father could play, and the final one was what is known as a ground, i.e. a tune with a constantly recurring bass tune played in the left hand, by an early composer. I can't remember which it is. Purcell was it? One of those. At which point the priest said, "That is it. That is what you were playing yesterday." And Father said, "Well, sorry, these things aren't possible. I can tell you exactly what I was doing. I was driving along beside Bassenthwaite Lake at the time you saw me here playing the harpsichord." So there's some great strange thing about that, and why it should happen. Why should it happen? I don't know. So it's fairly unusual, though, to have a live ghost, as it were. I mean, a ghost of somebody still alive.
A fascinating tale, the tale of Levens Hall. But there's one story left to tell before we leave the lakes, and it's the story of this, the Devil's Bridge at Kirby Lonsdale. How the bridge acquired its name is revealed in the local legend of the Crafty Crone of Kirby. Now, it seems that way back when, an old woman lived by the river, and she kept her cattle on the opposite bank, where the grazing was better. The only way she could get to her small herd was to wade the freezing water. Then, one evening, the devil popped up and offered to build a bridge over the river, and indeed overnight, if the old woman would offer him in return the soul of the first creature to cross the bridge first thing the next morning. The old woman agreed to the deal, and the devil rubbed his hands, or possibly his hooves, in glee, thinking, of course, that the old lady's soul was already his. Come the dawn, however, the wily old woman stood by the bridge and threw a small cake across it. Her dog, an animal with a sweet tooth obviously, chased after the titbit, crossing the bridge in the process. So the devil was compelled to accept a canine soul rather than a human one. In his anger and frustration, the devil leapt from the parapet, his claws leaving marks you can still see today. And he apparently didn't get very far either, For beneath the bridge is what some claim is just a rock formation, but what others who look closely, and closer yet, are convinced is the face of a demon. The picturesque and peaceful Devonshire village of Chagford in Dartmoor. I've come here to meet one of Britain's foremost experts on myths, legends, haunted stories and related topics, and his name is John Brooks. John, how are you? All right.
Garry.
Jolly good. Now look, here you are in Dartmoor because you're researching your latest book, aren't you?
Yes, I've just finished The Good Ghost Guide to Britain, which is 1,000 hauntings from all over the country.
Right, and Dartmoor itself, I mean, this is a bit of a return trip for you because you've got a previous book on Dartmoor walks, and should anybody have any doubt at all as to your sort of status as a principal ghost buster of the UK, your book on the ghosts of London has even been translated into Japanese, so you're known far and wide. But back closer to home and Dartmoor itself, is it as exciting a place as we might imagine?
I think so. It's got so much atmosphere, and it's probably derived from the Celtic legends which it abounds with.
Right. Can you sort of pick a couple of stories that you think we should really ought to look at as we're down here?
There's the Hairy Hands, which is wrench a motorcyclist off the road on a remote stretch of moorland road.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's the Hound of the Baskervilles itself.
Oh yes, well you can't come to Dartmoor and not do the Hound of the Baskervilles, I suppose. They sound great. Well, look at those. Where do you think is a good place to start us off, though?
Jay's grave might be nice.
Now, John, it's marked as Jay's grave on the map, but who was Jay?
And Mary Jay was a poor little orphan girl who was in Newton Abbot workhouse, and she committed suicide. She was probably made pregnant by the local farmer who she was sent out to work at the farm at Maniton. And it's thought that she probably committed suicide when she found she was pregnant by the farmer.
So when was this?
This was in 1803 or thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
So she's been here some time.
So why is she buried in this sort of windswept and lonely place such as this?
She committed suicide, therefore she wasn't allowed a churchyard burial.
Of course, yes.
It's there are always flowers on the grave here. It's a tradition that anybody who passes leaves a bunch of flowers, but the crosses are new to me. I haven't come across them before.
And what about Mary Jay? Has she lain dormant in her grave down all these years, John, or...?
She's supposed to walk. She's supposed to walk here, and the locals certainly don't like to pass this way on a very dark night. She's also supposed to haunt the old inn at Widdicombe.
Interesting.
Yes, but I can't think of any really convincing reason for that, except it's an excuse to go there.
And it's the nearest boozer.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, listen, before we leave this place, as it is traditional, I think I'd better do my bit and leave some flowers for Mary Jay. Now, John, we're on the stretch of road that runs between Two Bridges and Post Bridge in Dartmoor, a stretch of road that back in the 1920s, for sure, was feared by motorcyclists due to the legend of the hairy hands, which is something I know you've looked into. Do tell us that story.
The hairy hands had this awful habit of snatching at the handlebars of motorcyclists on this bit of road and swerving them off the road and into ditches or walls with usually fatal results. It happened on at least 3 occasions, and on 2 occasions there were witnesses, either sidecar passengers or a pillion rider, who witnessed the hairy hands actually on the handlebars.
But these hands were attached to what? Nothing?
Apparently not, no.
No. And have not been seen since the 1920s?
It's one of those hauntings which seem to have faded away to nothingness, yes.
So, John, just off of what we might loosely call the Road of the Hairy Hands, we find this place, Powder Mills, so named for the gunpowder mills which once occupied the site. This is a location that is significant to the story of the Hairy Hands. Perhaps you could tell us about